Hello everyone, Sidewin here. Today I'm going to be talking a bit about how Ancestry and Heritage work and interact in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I previously talked a bit about how you can go about choosing an Ancestry, but I focused on just the common ones and not the overview, which this video is. So to start, a little bit about what the Ancestry and the Heritage are in Pathfinder. So the two things are separate, and you can select a different set of heritages for each ancestry. So if you select human as your ancestry, you can select skilled human, versatile human, or winter touched human as your heritage, which is essentially your specific form of that ancestry. So it gives more diversity in how you can do stuff. So as a different example, I'll go to Rare Ancestries and demonstrate with the android ancestry. So this is basically a synthetic body. It's somewhat from Starfinder, so please be aware of that. And you'll notice that most of the list changed here. So now there's artisan, android, impersonator, laborer, polyglot, and warrior, rather than the human options. However, you might have noticed that two of the options did not change. That's Inuvarin and Dromar. And you would notice that everything in the uncommon and rare also would not change if you changed your ancestry. That's because all of those heritages are known as versatile heritages, shown here, which you can select as any ancestry. Now, some of them might not really make much sense for certain ancestries. For instance, if you went with the automaton and wanted to select the Inuvarin or Dromar heritage, it might be a little confusing. Or one that does obviously contradict is a skeleton with the Duskwalker heritage right here, because one part of the Duskwalker is neither your body nor spirit can ever become undead, and skeletons are automatically undead. However, for the most part, if you're not looking at these rare ancestries, basically all the ancestries can interact with all of the versatile heritages as long as it's in common. And the vast majority of all of them can interact with all of them. And you can also use it to reflavor. Like, again, if you wanted to go with android and you wanted to go with Inuvarin, you could use Inuvarin to represent an android raised by elves or created by elves. And you could do similar for orcs with the Dromar. You can also do that with a adopted ancestry general feat, but that is just another way to do it. So from here, a bit about selecting ancestries. So on the Archives and Nessus page, it's divided into two parts. There's ancestries and then there's versatile heritages. And it's divided by rarity. In Pathfinder, rarity generally is based more off rarity in the inner sea region of Golaron, more so than actual power level. Although they do tend to sort particularly weird stuff into the rare ancestries or the uncommon ones, and your GM may have other restrictions. For instance, when I'm running a homebrew world, I'll frequently restrict some of these options. Like, for example, I might say you can't play a merfolk. And there's multiple reasons the GM might do that. For one thing, if your campaign's set in the desert and there is no water, merfolk will not be fun, because if you go in here and head to the bottom, there's this hydration trait, which says you have to be in water at least once in a 24-hour period. And you'll suffocate after 48 hours. If you're in a desert, you won't necessarily be able to submerge. So there's that practicality reason why a GM might restrict it, or it might just not fit with the lore. For instance, if you build a whole nother world, but you don't really want to try and include all 40-some ancestries because you want to give a little more flair to it, you might ban certain ones. And GMs will also shift rarities. If you're a GM, you should feel free to do it. For instance, certain adventure paths will make options in the uncommon and rare more common, such as one set in the Mwangi Expanse will sometimes make Mwangi ancestries more common, while some more common Golarian, Inner Sea ancestries will be rare. Or if you're running a campaign set in the In Geb, the Undead Land, you might make it so that skeletons are common, but on the flip side, you might make it so that, say, halflings, gnomes, elves, etc. are uncommon. It just depends on what you're doing. So as a player, you should take that into account. Some GMs will also make it so that there can only be a certain number of uncommon or rare ancestries in a party. For instance, out of a party of 4, some GMs might say, this is my list of common ancestries, this is the list of uncommon and rare. You can have a maximum of 2 uncommon and 1 rare within the party. Please build your party accordingly. And in that case, you would have to take note and somewhat base your response on it. The other thing that some GMs will do is if you're playing an uncommon or rare ancestry, you have to explain how you ended up where the campaign's taking place. Because, quite frankly, it is a little weird to have an android walking around the Renaissance area world, so you kind of have to explain that. For instance, you could have to explain, well, how did you land on Golarion? Why are you an adventurer? How did you survive? Etc. Whereas most GMs wouldn't necessarily have that expectation for human. That one, it would be more of a, well, I used to be a farm boy and then goblins attacked my village. That would be perfectly normal. But if you choose something out of the rare, well, most GMs want a little bit more of an explanation. At this point, I think I'll talk a bit about how you go through reading an ancestry. And for an example here, I'm actually going to go with the android again just because it's a rare ancestry and a demonstration of some more uncommon things you might see. I'll probably also pull out a couple of others to show certain traits. So to start, you have the rarity and the humanoid trait and any other traits that apply. It's at the very top of the page. You'll also see legacy content on some to indicate that it was not created in the remaster because androids were created prior to the remaster. You could also technically use the Starfinder 2e android at this point because the two systems are supposed to be combined, and for that reason I don't expect Paizo to create a new version of the android. So the next part of this is, of course, the explanation of just the basics of, well, what is the ancestry? There's a couple of role-playing suggestions, a physical description, and just other descriptions. There's sometimes suggested names and other information based off what's important to the ancestry. These are more common with rare and uncommon. Then under the mechanics, you have the number of hit points given, the size, the speed, and the attribute use, as well as any attribute flaw. Note, you can always choose to override this by just taking +2 to 2 different ability scores rather than the +2 to 2 assigned ones and a +2 to another one with a -2 to a specified. Then there's a number of languages. Some GMs will override this if they are not running in Golarion. And then there's a couple of other traits that might appear. Again, more uncommon or rare ancestries tend to have more of these. So for Android, you have low light vision, which is automatically given, whereas many other ancestries require you to take a feat. Then there's the constructed trait for androids, which gives a +1 bonus on saving throws against diseases, poisons, and radiation. This last one isn't a specified damage type, but it's an interesting one to note here, because it probably won't come up, but it might if you say mix with Starfinder. Then there is emotionally unaware, which gives you a penalty. So that's something that isn't given in every ancestry, but you'll want to note it if they are here. Always read this bottom, especially if it's not a common ancestry. The Leshy is the only common ancestry that has something in that section, in that it has the photosynthesis type ability, so you might want to note it. Then the second thing I tend to go to is the heritages, so that I'll take a peek like I showed earlier. And it's the same set as I said earlier, and then it lists all of the versatile heritages on one page. So when you're picking this, you kind of want to come in with an idea, and then you can pick whichever one best fits. For instance, if your android used to be a say, translator, you might go with polyglot. But if they were created by elves, you might go in and take the elf Anuvarin heritage. One thing that is new in the remaster is the universal ancestry feats. All of these are rare, but they can be taken by any ancestry, and it's used to represent certain odd things that you might not necessarily have on most characters. For instance, there's right here a first level ancestry feat for reincarnated characters. So this could occur through a magic spell, or it could be you picked one of the reincarnated heritages. To take one of these, you have to be reincarnated. So, for instance, here it gives you additional trained proficiency in one skill of your choice and additional lore with the idea that you remember your past life. And most of these are the reincarnation type thing, so you won't be encountering them in most games. As you can see, a lot of them also derive from the Season of Ghosts adventure path and are connected to it specifically. But then you have the standard feats, and you can sort them by level. You might notice here that there's only 17 feats for the android, and I'll show you as a comparison the elf feats. So in here, they have 45. So that is a disadvantage of picking an uncommon or rare ancestry. There are quite simply fewer feats to select from. So you won't necessarily have a feat option at every level you get a feat. And that's something to be aware of when you're picking your ancestry. That is the basics of how you understand the ancestries. One other thing I will note about versatile heritages is it is somewhat mixed up with the remaster and pre-remaster. So you'll note here, for instance, when I went to the Android heritages and scrolled down, there's the Asmar versatile heritage. This is a pre-remaster version of the Nephilim. So if you're looking at a legacy ancestry, it'll show legacy versatile heritages, which you might not be able to select. In general, it's preferred that you pick a post-remaster heritage, unless your GM says otherwise. So for that, you can get the list by going to Versatile Heritages, and it'll only show the post-remaster stuff unless you explicitly tell it to. And on this page, it'll show both pre-remaster and post-remaster content. I would generally suggest double-checking before picking anything, but that's just a final note. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped you understand how ancestries and heritages fit together in Pathfinder 2e.